Last part. I appreciate that you want to stay here so much that you risk the chance of being stuck here forever. But glad the French people help each other out. All right. Last part. As I promised, the first one was the easiest. The second one was the most difficult. This one is, I think, the most fun. So it's a good to end with. I call it How to Change the World. Slightly ambitious, I admit. It starts with my observation that I have been failing for 15 years. In the past, I had many projects that always resulted in disasters. I'll give you one as an example. I had a very well visited website at the end of the 90s that made me a bit of money through advertising. So I thought, why not turn this into a startup, a real internet startup in the internet hype at that time. And I created a fabulously looking business plan with lots of colorful graphs, and of course all the lines went up of revenues and profits and number of employees. And I won an award as the Entrepreneur of the Year in the Netherlands for the best looking business plan. You sort of have an idea where this is going, right? And we got started with the team because I was able to find informal investors, and they invested 1 million euros in our little business. And we got started with 5 or 6 people, and we were quite successful at spending all that money till the last euro. Unfortunately, we didn't find any customers. So at one point we had to close the shop. This is just one example of the many failures I had behind me. At one point, I remember I was getting a job, and I was warning my new employer. I said, you have to know that I basically destroyed all the previous businesses where I worked. You might want to reconsider this. And I said, actually, it gives me a new idea. Why don't you hire me and then make me work for your competitor? I will annihilate them. Well, anyways, this went on and on until I started writing a blog called noop.nl, and this list was created by someone half a year ago, the top 200 agile blogs in the world, based on Twitter followers and Google PageRank and Alexa rating, etc. And number 1 is Martin Fowler, number 2 is Mike Cohn, and number 3, that was me, Jurgen Appelo. Yes, I finally achieved something. I sometimes think that maybe this should have been a failure, but some God out there said, no, you cannot have that amount of failure all for yourself. There will be nothing left for the European Union. So well, this was a success, and then my book, according to my publisher, it is a success, and now I have this course based on the book. And it's also doing quite well. And I organized the conference. At least I was the person behind the idea for a conference, the Agile Lean Europe Network. And this was because we organized. I attended a conference in Germany in February last year. Play for Agile, it was called. About 60, 70 people. It was the southern part of Germany, quite near to France and quite near to Switzerland. Only 2 hours drive, but there was nobody from France and there was nobody from Switzerland. There were 4 people from Canada, for some strange reason. I'm serious, I keep running into Canadians everywhere in Europe. I think there's some kind of wormhole between Europe and Canada or something. It's J.B. Rainsberger and Robin Diamond and Janet Gregory, etc., Michael Sahota, all these Canadians walking around Europe. I think they're trying to take over here or something. But anyways, so we noticed, we talked about Agile Lean Europe network that we wanted to start, and what do you know, within half a year a conference was organized in Berlin with people from 34 different countries. 34 different European countries, including Canada. And it was a big success. The next one is organized in Barcelona in end of August. So why was this? Why have I been successful at a number of projects? Well, some people have asked me, and I think I sort of have a basic idea now, after 15 years of doing it wrong, of convincing other people to change some of their behaviors, like get them to read my book or get them to come to a conference or things like that. And this relates to the question, the challenge that I have for people in my courses, because I always ask them, what are your main problems that you struggle with? And they always have questions like this: how do I make the rest of the organization more agile? Or how do I motivate my employees to develop themselves some more? Or how do I convince my customers that they should accept Scrum? It's the same question again and again. I know what they should be doing, but they're not doing it. I want to change their behaviors. Well, this is basic change management. There's plenty of books around about that. About being successful at influencing other people, because you have a good idea, but you need to get other people along. So this also relates back to this slide, by the way, that I showed you earlier. The ability to change organizational culture and resistance to change, the number 1 and number 3 reasons, have both to do with changing organizations, changing organizational culture. So this is a hot topic. How to change the social system. That's what I wanted to learn. I read a number of very, very good books, a few bad ones also, but these were the ones that I found particularly inspiring. Leading Change, Influencers, Switch, and Fearless Change. And I learned a lot from them, and what I will show you now is sort of my key insights. And I do think that the models in the books themselves were a bit simplistic here and there. I wanted something that was more realistic, a bit more related to complexity thinking. So this is my own version of it. The 4 facets of social change, I call it. Again, this is the Mojito method. The Mojito method applied to change, because all the ingredients already exist. I just stir them together and turn them into something that I think is more amazing. First, the overview. You have to be a systems thinker or a complexity thinker, whatever term you want to use. Second, you have to understand that people have to change at the individual level. Third, there are interactions between the people. It's like injecting a virus in a social system. You want the behavior to copy. And fourth, there is an environment, and sometimes you may be able to tweak the environment, and that will influence people's behaviors. Let's look into the details. Dance with the system, that's the first part. Surprise, surprise. There's a model for that. The PDCA cycle, good old Plan, Do, Check, Act by Deming and Schuhart. There are newer models, but I like the old one. It is useful enough for me. It starts with plan. Do you know exactly what your goal is? And where are things going well? This is an important question. Where are things going well as you would like them to be? They did exactly the same thing with the Agile Manifesto that I showed you earlier. 17 people got together, they shared ideas, and they told each other what was going well for them in their projects. And then they realized what kind of practices that they wanted to other people to adopt. We had something similar there at the Play for Agile conference, where we got together and we noticed that the people from Switzerland and from France were missing. We were sitting together in a bar and having great discussions, and we were coming up with new projects, new things to do together, and we realized this is the kind of behavior that we want. Get people together at a conference, in a bar, and they will start working together. That's the kind of behavior we wanted to have. Then, the second question, the second part is do. And you have to understand what are the crucial steps that people have to make, and when and where do you start? Because there's perhaps a right timing for your idea. The simple step with Agile is, well, here's an example. A task board with a number of sticky notes. It's a bit of a strange task board, I admit. Beer, cake, football. So apparently this is somebody who is planning a sprint at a party, at the beginning of the night and sort of planning how many beers he can drink for the rest of the night and how many cakes he can eat, and then have that all in front of him at the table as a sprint backlog, and then really commit to trying to finish everything by the end of the sprint, the end of the night. And if he's really done, then all the sticky notes are in the last column, and he will show the host, look, I have finished it all. And that would be called Scrum then, right? There's another version of it. Some people say, I'm not going to do all this estimation. I'm not going to estimate the number of beers and cakes. I'm just going to drink as fast as I can, but with just one beer at a time. And they call that Kanban. It's limited work in progress. So different versions of Agile, but it all boils down to the same thing. It's a task board with sticky notes flowing across it. Simple as it can be. Then check. It's the third part. You have to understand if you're going in the right direction. I showed you the feedback door earlier. This is how I check during a course if things are going well. Short feedback cycles. Then the last part is act. This is understanding that you have to do this again and again and again and learn from those experiences. A favorite example that I use is the tablet computer. By iPad, it is the 15th attempt at creating a tablet computer. The first one that was a success, but all the other ones failed, including Apple's own Newton, which was also a huge failure. But I'm quite sure that they learned from all those previous experiences, and this is what you have to do as well as a complexity thinker. So you have this social system, you poke it with ideas, and you see how the system responds, and then you poke it with new ideas. And this is what it means to be a change agent. Try things out. And I love this quote by Jurgen Appelo. She said, "We cannot control systems or figure them out, but we can dance with them." I love the metaphor. Basically, she says, there's this social system that you want to change, and you want to have it, you want to move it over there, so you start dancing with it. And if you're a good dancer, you're able to move in that direction, but maybe the system does this, and then, oh my God, you're going in the direction that you didn't want. So somehow you have to change and then do something else, and you turn in that direction. This can go on and on. If you're a bad change agent, you will dance all over the place. But if you're a good one, a practiced one, then you might be able to move in that direction. So I like that metaphor. Dance with the system. So if you have some questions, like for example, you want the organization to be more agile, how do I convince my managers to be more agile? Then I have some questions for you. Like, what is your goal, and do you know where things are going well? And do you know what the crucial simple steps are, and when exactly do you start? And how are you planning to get feedback? Measure it. And are you prepared to do this again and again and again? And accelerate the results. That's part one. Part two, mind the people. As I said, the people have to change at the individual level. They're all different. And surprise, surprise, there's a model for that too. ADCAR, it is called. A model for personal change. It says it starts with awareness. That is usually the only thing that people do. They send each other messages. Like, I think that you should change because this is necessary. And then they stop. But this is only communicating. It is a part of what you have to do. Maybe you have to set the right example, of course. But this is something that you can learn to do well. Here's an example. Our governments want us to stop smoking. At least they pretend that they want us to stop smoking. Of course, they earn a lot of money over the taxes on cigarettes, but at least this is creating awareness that smoking kills. It is not enough to change people's behaviors, because this is just the first part of the model. You need more. This is where it gets interesting. You have to somehow make it urgent and make people feel that the change is desirable. Turn it into something that they like. Use their language, see it from their perspective, and tweak it a little. I like explaining it with this example. I was in Rio de Janeiro last year, doing a course over there, And I was sitting in a bar, drinking one of the many different kinds of juices they over there, fantastic. And looking at television, and I don't speak Portuguese, so I simply was watching the interesting imagery. And there was a soap opera going on, a Brazilian soap opera. And the basic pattern of the Brazilian soap opera is like this. People were fighting, then there was a bit of kissing, they were fighting, a little bit more of kissing, and they were back to fighting again. I thought, my God, that's brilliant. That is so smart. They really understand what we like watching. I thought, at which times it is interesting to watch my neighbors? Well, only when they're kissing or when they're fighting. At other points, it is absolutely not interesting to watch the neighbors, I can tell you. So this is basic human desires, that relate to what we love doing. I showed you the champ frog scale earlier. It's just my model of intrinsic desires. There are other ones, but I think this one is useful. And I have another example. This one. This is one of the best Dutch inventions ever. I'm serious. This was invented at Schiphol Airport a number of years ago, where apparently they had a problem. They had some kind of problem at the Schiphol Airport, so they put images of little flies in the urinals. Now, imagine that you're a man. That might be difficult for some people in the audience over here. Just imagine that you're a man and you're standing there and you're looking at the fly and you think, am I able to flush away the fly? That will be curiosity. That's 1 point on the champ frog scale, right? Other people might think, am I able to hit it right between the eyes? That would be mastery. That's another point on the champ frog scale. Well, some people think, say goodbye to the world, little fly. That would be power. That's the third one. So at least 3 points on the champ frog scale. This is a very good invention. Of course, the little fly had nothing to do with keeping the room clean, which was the desired behavior of men. But they did something that made it desirable, that turned it into something that they like doing. You can do it in many different ways. I mean, we feed medicine to children by coating them in sugar. It's exactly the same thing. A bit simpler, but same thing. By the way, I heard that we now export these toilets all over the world, and the one that go to United States do not have a little black fly, but a miniature version of the Canadian flag. All right. Knowledge, third one. This comes natural to people in the agile world, because this is about teachers, mentors, gurus, speakers, trainers, coaches, whatever. People who help others, trying to understand how to change their behaviors. So we know all about that. So now people are aware of the need for change. They desire the change. They actually know how to do it because they're getting a little bit of help. And then the fourth one is often obstacles along the way. Something is holding them back. Yes, they would love to do test-driven development, they said on my teams, but we have this deadline on Friday, so we have no time. So this is getting rid of all the obstacles, figuring out what is keeping them from going that direction and do something about it. Basically, the impediment resolver that the Scrum Master is as well. One of my favorite examples is this one, by the Buy Now with One Click button by Amazon, which is, after the red button in the White House, the most dangerous button in the world, as far as I'm concerned. I'm serious. I've been warning against this for half a year, and I clicked on the damn button just a few weeks ago when I was trying to store something in my wish list. I'm glad it was just a book and an airplane that I bought at that moment. Anyways, so Amazon made it very simple. They removed all the obstacles and made it very simple for you to purchase something on the website. Another example, Scrum, according to some people, is quite easy to get started with. Just a few roles, just a few practices, and off you go. It's difficult to do it well, but getting started is not that hard. Then, next part is reinforcement. This is about sustainable behavior, making sure that if you really have changed, you stay that way. For example, some people hook up their smartphones to their Nike shoes and start running against each other. They work out with others, making it competitive, making it fun. Gamification is all the rage in the last few years. Reinforce the good behaviors by adding social and competitive elements so that people keep up. That's the ADKAR model for individual change. So if you have some challenge, like I want my software developers to educate themselves, well, how will you communicate? How will you set the right examples? Can you make things urgent or desirable? Who is going to help them by teaching them? Can you remove all the obstacles, making things easy? And how can you make it sustainable, the new behaviors? Maybe apply some gamification or something. All kinds of questions you have to ask yourself. Part 3, stimulate the network. It is like a behavioral virus that you want to introduce, as the books say. Well, there's a model for that too. The adoption curve, the innovation adoption curve by Rogers. Basically says if you change people's behaviors in a social network, it usually follows a number of different kinds of people that change. And I put a new one, put an extra one in front. Those are the initiators. That's you, the change agents themselves. They are the ones who want that curve to start. And they have to ask themselves some questions like, are you really committed? And do you have people helping you out? Do you have a guiding coalition, as John Cotter says? So people that make sure that you're not on your own. Here's a change agent. He got a Nobel Prize for just the idea of changing the world. Well, I had the same idea. I never got a Nobel Prize, I can tell you. But at least the ideas were quite good. And he has a number of helpers. He's not on his own. Same with me. Whenever I try to change things around me, I make sure that I have fellows helping me out. Like these were my heroes when I was working on the Agile in Europe network. Giving me some a shoulder to cry on, or 4 or 8 shoulders to cry on. That was quite useful. But then the curve starts. The innovators are the first group. They are the ones who are most eager to start with the change. They stand in line for hours to purchase the new iPad, even though it's almost exactly the same as the previous one. Doesn't make a difference for them because they want it. The Apple logo was on it. So here we go. Stand in line for hours. That's the innovators. They are important. You need to get the innovators on your side because they get the whole wave rolling. Then the next group, they are the early adopters. They don't want to wait for hours. They are interested, but first they're going to check out what the others are doing. And then they pick up those signals and they broadcast it all around them. And there can be some very important people among them. The leaders. Can you get the leaders on your side? Like Rachel Davies and Lisa Crispin and J.B. Rainsberger. They were leaders with many followers. And when they picked up what we were doing with the Agile in Europe network, they broadcasted it to everyone. It's good to have these people on your side. Then it gets difficult. The majority consists of two parts, early and late majority. They are different kinds of people. They have different needs. So what works for the first ones, the innovators and the early adopters, who are most eager to be agile, it doesn't work with the majority. They have other concerns. So you have to think about those other concerns. And they say that quite many ideas drop in a chasm here between the early majority and the early adopters. There's a chasm there. Many ideas drop there. They never get out because the change agents never really thought of the later part of the curve. So that's important. Then the skeptics. They don't care. They think it's not a good idea, actually, what you came up with. The tablet computer, that's just 4 iPhones taped together. Makes no sense. I thought exactly the same thing when it was introduced a few years ago. Now I have a tablet computer, so apparently skeptics can be convinced after a while. Well, the point is, the experts say you have to listen to them. You will not be able to convince them right away. That doesn't matter. You must listen to them because they give you very useful feedback. And you can use that feedback to tweak your message and to deal with the earlier parts of the curve. Then the laggards. That's a difficult group. They will resist in any way they can. There's basically just one way of dealing with it, and that's hoping that they die. Or perhaps leave the organization or something like that. Perhaps the majority will in the end trample them at the end, if you're nearly there. But important is, for now, you have to ignore them, because you're not going to convince them. Whatever you do, just do not cry victory too soon. That's what I picked up from various resources. Because sometimes when people are here, they convinced most of the people in the organization, and then they are here, only the laggards are left to do, and then they say, yay, we're done. We're finished. And then they stop pushing for change. They stop monitoring. And then the laggards rise. And they undo everything that you have achieved. And the whole organization reverts back to its old pattern. This is a great opportunity if you're an agile coach, because you can start all over again with the same company, charging double. But not for ethical reasons, perhaps, what you're after. So the point is, do not forget about that last portion. Don't stick around for a while longer. Keep monitoring things, is what the experts say. So this is about the interactions. Behaviors copy across a social network, and it follows a curve. So if you want people to use your product or your services, then maybe you have to ask yourself some questions. Am I committed? Are there people assisting me? Who are the innovators and early adopters? Who are the leaders among them? How is the majority different from the earlier kinds of people? And can I deal with the skeptics? Am I actually listening to them? And if you're really successful, then make sure you do not forget about that last part, about the laggards. That was the third part. Last, change the environment. Self-organization happens within a boundary, is what the complexity scientists have said. Ilya Prigogine, also Nobel Prize winner, but one who actually did something. He came up with the idea that self-organization only exists within a boundary. It cannot exist without an environment. So we can tweak that boundary. We can manipulate it, and then we also manipulate what self-organizes within it. We don't even have to touch the system inside. Examples: information. This is the 5 eyes model. It was actually the 4 eyes model originally, but I inserted infrastructure, so now it is the 5 eyes model, and I can legitimately call it my own model. That is very useful. So now it is the 5 eyes. It started with information. Information radiators. Broadcast the situation back to people. We are quite good at that in agile communities. This is what they have in traffic management. Speed limit is 25. Your speed is 48. Whoops, is what most people think. I did not mean to go that fast, and they slow down. Research shows that this is much more effective than police cars hidden behind billboards and with radars and ticketing people. This makes much more sense, and it is cheaper. This one I read an article in Wired magazine just a few months ago. Very interesting. An information radiator. You simply broadcast back to the system the results of its own behavior, and then it will adapt. We can do the same things in our organization. This is, by the way, what we did when we organized the conference. We had a sort of an information radiator on the website, It's very hard to do with a website, but this was the most popular page with the countries represented. And people were checking out which countries were not represented at the conference yet. And do we know anyone in Iceland? Because we have nobody from Iceland yet. And they were trying to find among their contacts in LinkedIn if there is anyone from Iceland that we could invite. So this was useful as well. Then identity. I told you about team identity earlier today. This is a tough one, but useful, very useful if you're successful. It can be very powerful. This is about peer pressure. For example, this is a picture of a typical Dutch family. Yes, I'm sorry about that. This is how my fellow countrymen dress up when it's Queen's Day at the 30th of April or whenever there's a big international football match. Apparently, there's a lot of peer pressure going on, otherwise nobody would be found dead in clothes like this. But at these moments, it is sort of compulsory. You have to, otherwise you do not count as part of the team. Some organizations are actually able to achieve that. They have such a strong corporate culture, or some teams have such a strong team identity that peer pressure can do its work. And then you can say things like, TDD is some of the stuff that we do around here. Otherwise, you're simply not part of what we stand for here as an organization. And then people will adapt because they want to belong to that identity. By the way, of course the Dutch are not the only ones dressing up in funny clothes, right? Everyone does that. I found a picture of a family in Canada doing the same thing. They're going to kill me over there if I have a course scheduled in end of May. I wonder if I am allowed to get into the country. All right, incentives. That's the third one. Third I, this is about giving rewards. Dangerous, but it can be useful. The science says, according to the articles that I've read, it can work if you incentivize good behavior with small rewards. Keep them small, like a compliment, a movie ticket, things like that, so that the reward itself does not become the goal of people. You do not give your children 2,000 euros for earning a high grade in school. That will lead to dysfunctional behavior, I can assure you. But a compliment or things like that is okay. And also it is better to incentivize good behavior over outcomes, because behavior is harder to cheat. It is harder to cheat doing your homework than cheating earning a high grade at school, because high grades can be faked. I can tell you how. So that's incentives. Infrastructure. That's the one I added because I think it is somewhat different. This is about the physical infrastructure, guiding people's behaviors and reinforcing them in certain directions. I have a picture of Schiphol Airport, my favorite airport, where they are masters at manipulating you when you're there. You don't know it when you walk on the airport, but they do it. There's science behind it. They make sure that you end up at your gate as easily as possible. No, first in the shops, then to the gates, that is what they're good at. So you can also change physical infrastructure in organizations, put teams together, remove the walls among people, put the coffee machine in the strategic place, things like that. That's manipulating the physical infrastructure. Then institutions, that's the last one. I told you about communities of practice earlier. This is a picture of the guilds in Brussels, Brussels Market Square. And I told you that Spotify actually names their communities of practice, they name them guilds. That's quite interesting. So the guilds are the self-organized entities of people who do similar things, and then they tell each other, these are the rules that we agree on. Now the guilds in these kinds of guilds had sometimes not that nice rules for each other, but the idea is similar. They say, if you're a tester in this organization, then these are the rules and practices for testers. Otherwise, you should not be a tester around here. That's what our guild says. So that's the institutions that you can try and get on your side. I'd like to end with this quote by John Cotter. Sometimes the question that I literally get is, how do you change the organization's culture? Well, he says, culture changes only after you have successfully altered people's actions, and when the new behavior produces a group benefit for a period of time. So basically, if you do everything that I've just been talking about for 40 minutes, and you're successful at it, and the new behaviors are sustainable, then you will have changed the organizational culture. It is the outcome. It is not item one on a checklist, unfortunately. So it's a lot of work, I'm afraid. So if you want your friends to come to a conference or a night like this, then how do you radiate information? How do you use a group identity, perhaps? Is there some peer pressure that you can invite? Can you incentivize good behavior? Maybe the infrastructure can be manipulated with some barriers and guides, move people in the right direction. Maybe some institutes can set some rules. Those are the questions that you might ask yourself as a change agent. So I call this a Change Management 3.0 model, with a tongue-in-cheek reference to the book, because this part is not in the book. I wrote this afterwards, so now I have a booklet of 80 pages, and you can find it online if you Google for it, or on management30.com/how to change the world, with dashes in between. Or simply give me an email, send me an email, and I will show you where to find it. That's it. Of course, my last plug for the ALE conference in Barcelona. I am one of the founding fathers, so I have to tell everyone that there's a big European conference heading, and it's not that far from Nice. Yay! All right, these were my URLs on SlideShare. You'll find lots of presentations, including material here, but I just promised the organizers I will make this subset available as separate downloads through Telecom Valley. And you can find me on Twitter, on noab.nl, and on my websites. Thank you very much for listening. It is now 8:30. We still have the drinks to do, I believe, and we should be out of here by 9, I heard. That includes the cocktails. Or should we be out of this room by 9? I'm sorry? Okay, so we can have cocktails for the rest of the night downstairs. Okay. Then we a few. No, let's do a few questions. But I just wanted to make sure that I was not stealing your cocktail time. If you only had half an hour, that would be terrible. You would kill me, I think. So, okay, let's do a few questions and the rest downstairs in a more informal setting. Yes?
Ale Congress, the sign is a wine cup. Sounds like a lot of fun.
Good question. No. The cup is a Belgian beer glass. Ale, beer, yes. Though I noticed that the French tend to see a wine glass in it. How strange. Yes. I also know that the British tend to see the Holy Grail in it. I don't care, as long as you pour alcohol in it, that's fine, right? All right, over there, in the top, yes, you sir.
Have you had to make two people work together, two people who don't like each other?
If I ever had to make two people work together who didn't like each other? I'm trying to dig in my memory, but I cannot come up with an example. Basically, they self-organized into a big distance, I think. Yeah, and ended up on different teams. I had an example of a team kicking out one person. They didn't like him, so I fired him, because nobody else wanted him. No, I'm sorry, I don't have specific examples there, but maybe if I think about it for a while, then I'm perhaps downstairs and we can discuss. Okay, the gentleman behind you.
Scrum and Agile methodologies, and then we have the old traditional project planning, backward planning, model methodologies. A very practical should we forget all those traditional project planning tools,
Mhm.
or is there some way between to merge all those techniques?
Right. So question is, should we forget all the old ways of doing things and focus only on the new? Well, if you have the luxury of doing that, of course. If you are like most other people in a situation where the environment demands that you do something, that you deliver some kind of product, or maybe you have to deliver a Gantt chart or something, then produce the Gantt chart. It is unuseful for you as a Scrum team. Some say it is like paying a tax. It is paying a tax in order to be able to do business. You don't like paying the tax. You don't like what they do with the taxes in the government. But it is part of doing business. You pay the tax and you get on with your life. And this is what some say, is the same with the stuff that the environment demands from you, a Gantt chart or whatever you call it, V model, any demands that they place on you, you make adapters. Michael Sahota is a Canadian coach who is just about to launch his book. I wrote a foreword for it, and he explains it, how to create adapters for your agile practices so that it fits in more traditional organizations, and you basically try to wiggle agile in.
But independently of the requirements of the environment, if you have a very complex project, let's say you make an airplane, it's a bit risky to do the first quick version of an airplane, put passengers into this, it flies.
No, but they do that. They call it a simulation. They are agile in different ways. They have simulations, they have mock-ups, then they have test drives or test flights in this case. And what's the fourth one? Oh, then they make sure that the parts of airplanes that they use, that they can be replaced, that they are modifiable. So there are 4 ways of being agile with manufacturing, right? You simulate the hell out of everything that you can try to simulate. That gives you a reasonable example, an idea of how things will look, and then you will make mock-ups so that you can touch it and look at it and walk in it, but still not a real airplane. And then, so this is agile, but then in a more physical sense. Yes?
Yeah, in part 3 of change,
Yeah.
when you're talking about the interactions,
Yeah.
so you have this distribution of adoption,
Yeah.
and you linked key questions to each phase.
Yes.
And so, do you think these questions, should you plan the answers you would be giving at the beginning, or is it something you address step by step?
On the way. Yes, on the way. I am now organizing an unconference in Amsterdam in beginning of July. I use my own model with the questions, and I simply look over them. Are there any good questions that I could answer? Just reflect on it. Like, identity, oh yeah, that's a good one. I used that quite successfully with the Agile in Europe network, where I said, in Europe we have our own European problems. We are not Americans. Yay, we're not Americans. We have our own problems. Works like crazy. This is typical identity thing. So I could look at a question like, can I use that identity trick again to get people to come to Amsterdam for the conference, or well, any other kinds of questions. Maybe I cannot answer them, but at least I can look at them and think about them for a while. But there's no order to it, there's no demand, there's certainly not upfront requirement that you have to answer them all. They're just suggestions.
And then in the part for the late majority, you're saying you should listen to feedback, which is actually the same thing. You should address the questions as they raise.
Yeah.
Then how much do you accept to modify your offer to fit the needs of the majority without making the early adopters reluctant?
So how do you change your offer without losing the commitment of the earlier groups? Yeah, that's a good question. I've never thought of it. So how, if I introduced test-driven development, for example, if I want to do that, maybe I have a few innovators, very eager ones, and early adopters, and then I have to address the majority. I have to weaken, perhaps, TDD, modify it in such a way that the earlier group said, oh, but this is not what we have signed up for. Yeah, that's an interesting balancing trick there. I think this could happen. But it will depend on the specific change that you're trying to introduce. But it's a great question. I've never heard of it before. Yeah. Thanks. Other questions? Not so difficult, please. No, not you again. Anyway, I'll get back to you. Yeah. Yes, there's research. Well, not my experience, because my experience only extends to one company where I was responsible myself, and then thousands of discussions with other people from other companies, but I have not been at those organizations. I do know that there's research out there. There's actually a book called "The Business Value of Agile Development," I think. By David F. Rico, and he collected all that research that proves that Agile works, that there is a noticeable difference. So the proof is there that it works. Yeah. So if you want to know what it is, then I can refer you to the book if needed.
Until the next model.
Until the next model. Well, yes and no. That's
It's back to what you said. At one point in time, you felt that people are looking for like a good solutions. Okay. It
Yeah.
needs to be like this, and they tend to be
Yeah.
quite dogmatic.
Yeah.
According to PDCA.
Yeah. Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
If you have understood PDCA, you understood everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, what I like about what you say, just use it as in a complex thinking. It's
Right.
a toolbox and use it. But
Yeah.
most of the time, people will just search for like an easy solution to implement, and I need to respect some different
Yes.
things. And
Yeah.
PDCA or different, over 2.0 solutions were pretty good at that time, and
Yeah.
now we're in the agile thing, and it will evolve.
Right.
It's not a fixed model.
Good point. So you say it will evolve. No model is fixed. They will be replaced by other ones. They will be improved. The Newtonian physics still apply. We all know it fails at some point. And then Einsteinian physics apply, but that also fails at some point. We improve on our models all the time, but we use them at the same time in different contexts. That's okay, indeed. I still use the PDCA. It's fine for what I need to tell here. I also think that, you're right. Some people keep looking for the newest thing and then discard everything else as if that has no value anymore. That's, of course, not true. I also believe that even though the name Agile might vanish, the name Scrum might be replaced by something else, I don't care. What will never change is that we're working with complex adaptive systems. That's a law. We will not change that. And so maybe the brands will become different, but the fact that it's about human beings, that will stay true for the next thousands of years or longer, until we work with robots, perhaps, and perhaps then we have to reconsider. The names will change, but I'm quite sure plenty of stuff that we already had in the past should not be discarded so easily, because, quite useful stuff. As long as and that's why I always talk about complexity thinking. It is about the mindset. If you have the right mindset, and all these tools are awesome, and you pick and choose what you use. And for example, and that's what I want to end tonight with. Dave Snowden has a great metaphor for where he talks about cooking. He says, and this might appeal to the French, of course. He says some people are adequate cooks because they simply follow recipes. They follow recipes from the books. They know how to do those recipes. The results are quite okay. You can offer your friends a good meal, and they will compliment you. Oh, you're such a great cook, but you just follow a recipe. They have no idea how to improvise. If they open a refrigerator, they won't know what to cook with what is in the refrigerator. They need a recipe. I am like that. And he said, the real cooks They have the right mind. They know what it means to be a cook. They can cook anything from their refrigerator, whatever they happen to have. And they know the science of cooking. They know what it means when meat cooks at 60 degrees or 70 degrees, right? I had no idea. I just follow recipes. And so he says, and I like that, we need more good cooks in the software world who understand a bit of the science and do not simply follow the recipes, whether they are called Scrum or Kanban, because in the end they don't really know what they're doing. Though the results can be quite okay. Yeah. All right, thank you very much. Let's continue discussions downstairs.